Once again, a warm welcome to you in this edition of the Morning Call. It's a new dawn in Mauritania following the swearing-in of Mohamed Ould Ghazouani as the newly elected president. The inauguration ceremony on Thursday was attended by heads of states of 12 African countries, along with delegations from several Arab and European countries. In his inaugural address, he pledged to be a president for all Mauritanians of different political orientations. He takes over from outgoing President Mohammed Ould Abdel-Aziz, who came to power after a 2008 military coup. For the Mauritanian population, expectations are high in this new leadership. They hope the promises he made during the campaign period will become a reality.
Mauritania's Mohamed Ould Ghazouani on Thursday took the oath of office as the country's new commander-in-chief. This marks the country's first peaceful transfer of power. The swearing-in ceremony was graced by several presidents in the West African sub-region, including Senegal's Macky Sall and Mali's Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. In his first address, he applauded the maturity of the country's political system, promising to make the country's security a priority. Ghazouani won the presidential election in the first round with 52% of the vote. While his victory was welcomed by France, Algeria and Morocco, it was contested by the opposition, whose appeals were rejected by the Constitutional Council. He succeeds President Mohammed Ould Abdel-Aziz, who was barred from seeking a third term under the Constitution.
Mohamed Ould Ghazouani is now in charge of Mauritania following his swearing-in on Thursday. Although it marks the first presidential transition without a coup d'etat, it must be recorded that his early demand for victory on June 23rd on the basis of the then partial results have thrown opposition supporters onto the streets and opens the way to incidents. After this series, things seem to be returning to normalcy. To go by Ghazouani, the newly elected president, he will work according to the respect of the constitution and laws of the country. But what does our first expert think about this oath?
To talk about this new leadership in Mauritania is Mamadou Sy, the publishing director of Éveil Hebdo in the capital, Nouakchott. Mamadou, thank you very much for joining us today in this program. So what do you think about Mohamed Ould Ghazouani's inaugural speech?
It should be recalled that President Ghazouani's speech particularly raised a lot of hope for the Mauritanian people who long for change. It must also be recalled that this is the first time in the country that there has been a pacific change, if I can call it that way, in Mauritania. So people think that the arrival of the new president could bring about an evolution, at least a change in their daily lives. It is extremely difficult at the moment in Mauritania. The situation is precarious for many families here in the country, given the difficulties, economic inequalities and high cost of living throughout the country. With Ghazouani's inauguration yesterday, Mauritania experienced its first democratic alternation at the top of the state. But for some observers, this is a change in continuity in a country that has been ruled by the military for 40 years. What will the new president be able to do without his predecessor? We think that he is indeed a friend of Abdel-Aziz, but we think equally that he would not follow the same policy as President Abdel-Aziz, because these last elections have shown that Mauritania is a very divided country. It is a country where there has been the development of communitarianism, especially with the Abdel-Aziz policy. In that regard, we think that in order to be able to establish his power, it is important that Ghazouani be a change and for him to become an essential change in Mauritania. That is why, as I said, Ghazouani's arrival beforehand gives Mauritanians a lot of hope.
And the last question, Mamadou, what do you think would be the very first issues that the new president Ghazouani needs to address?
Il faut dire la première tâche de ce président actuellement élu,
It must be said that the first task of this recently elected president is first and foremost the question of national unity and social cohesion in Mauritania. This is a fundamental issue for the unity of the country, because during the last elections, we saw divisions among the people of Mauritania, and identity vote that was created everywhere. Secondly, the second very important task for the President of the Republic is necessarily to have an inclusive dialogue with the Mauritanian opposition in order to reach a consensus and find solutions to the current crisis in the country. And the third element, in my opinion, is good governance. Mauritania has been poorly managed in recent years. It must be acknowledged that Abdel-Aziz's management was chaotic and created a lot of inequalities in the country, although it must also be noted that there have been very important achievements by President Abdel-Aziz, particularly in terms of security, infrastructure, and the construction of many public buildings in Mauritania. So these are three elements that I think that are fundamental issues for the new president to address.